is going on, everybody, and welcome to the Saturday edition of the Stochastic NHL Strategy Show. Past few days have been crazy. I am your host, Josh Harris. Both of us are a little bit under the weather here. Rare that we didn't have a show yesterday. Got a message from Cliffy in the middle of the night, and that was a bit worrisome because this dude will work through anything. And this was his first sick day that I remember.
Yeah, five. This is my fifth season here. That was my first time having to take a day off because I was sick. It was just not good.
And I would have went solo yesterday, but I had no voice. So I had a lot of hot tea yesterday. And got a 7-gamer. Lots of teams on the back-to-back here. I would say I know what happened yesterday, but I don't really. I fell asleep before 9:15, so I checked the box scores. I saw what happened. I cashed, whatever. I used Nashville and Ottawa, but a lot of these late games I missed the action of. But the box scores don't tell the whole story. It's not like I watch like 19 hours of hockey a night, but
I mean, I did see the Leafs blow a 3-1 lead to Columbus to lose 6-5 in overtime. That's always nice to wake up to.
Yeah, and that was the thing in the chat. Clayton was like, I said I liked the Leafs last night, and he was like, you're going to have to delete this. I said, you know what? Liking the Leafs and knowing they're fraudulent, not mutually exclusive. So they got a good performance, and they lost. That was a win-win. That was like the best thing I ever did. Also, yeah, Connor Ingram shut out the Ducks. I liked the Ducks last night, but I always like the Ducks. But how you doing? You had a nice little few days.
Yeah, it's just been a bit of a whirlwind because I had that 5 days without power, and then power came back, and then 12 hours later I had to leave to go visit family for Christmas, so I was gone for 4 days. Then I come back, and then 2 days after that I'm sick. So it's been a little rough couple of weeks here, but I like this 7-gamer that we have here tonight because it does look like there are a couple smash spots, and I think that's going to leave maybe some higher priced or elite lines like way overlooked, and that's kind of what we're seeing in the top stacks. So I like slates like this where there are obvious spots, but there are a lot of good teams in the non-obvious spots that you can switch to. So one of those slates where you're playing against the players in the tournaments that you're in. I like those.
Yeah, I'm looking at the top stacks right now. Of the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Of the top 10 lines, 2 of them were projected for over 24% ownership. The other 8 are under 8.5%. So, yeah, there's going to be lots of options tonight. And even if you build a chalky first stack, there's plenty of ways to get different, even though it's a 7-gamer. So I do kind of echo those sentiments there. Let's get into this, shall we? As always, thank you for your support over the past few weeks. It means a lot. As always, what am I saying? As always, we get paid through our affiliate link. So if you are premium and your membership is expiring and you want to renew it, please go through the affiliate link so we don't live in a van down by the river. I can do that because my voice is all messed up, so I can sound like Chris Farley. I don't really want to live in a van down by the river, and I won't if you guys don't get a membership. But if you do have a membership and you do want to support us further, it means a lot means a lot to us if you go through the link, which I will post in the chat. There we go. Thank you. New Jersey Devils with a 2.7 total heading into Boston. The Bruins have a 3.3 total. Devils played last night. They won. They embarrassed the Sens. The Sens are just atrocious. They are a joke. I don't understand what the coach is doing either for the Sens. They practiced morning 2 games in a row with Tkachuk, Stützle, Giroux. And then yesterday morning, they practiced Stützle, Tkachuk, Batherson. And both times at pregame skate, they went back to Tkachuk, Norris, and someone. So I don't know what that's about, but kind of screwed up my lineup, but it's okay. Devils took advantage there. Not too much ownership in this game on the Devils side. One of the highest positive leverage lines is going to be the Jack Hughes line. Now, Boston's on the front end of a back-to-back, so we don't have their starter confirmed yet. Devils played last night with Nigel Dawes, so it's going to be Vitek Vanacek in that tonight. And Boston mixing up their lines a bit. They're going Pasternak, Zaka, Geeky, Marchand, Coyle, DeBrusque. Devils probably the same as last night coming off a win. So Hughes, Bratt, Toffoli. This is interesting because not much ownership on that Hughes line. It's not the best matchup because the Boston goaltending has been very, very good. Boston top line, not super great defensively. I mean, none of the Boston lines are traditional Boston defensive juggernauts. So I don't mind going back to the Devils top line here. It's one of those lines you were just talking about, a little bit more expensive than the chalk going overlooked here. Normally back-to-back would annoy me, but almost every team on this slate is back-to-back. Now, the Devils don't have the highest road total, 2.7. It's not great, but at 3% ownership for a fully correlated line, I don't mind taking a stab there. Boston side's a little bit more interesting just because the Devils' goaltending has been atrocious. That Pasternak line's coming in at 18.3, which is pretty cheap. It's fully correlated. You get Geeky on the top power play unit as well. I think I prefer the Devils side. The Boston top line getting a little bit of positive leverage at 8.5%. I'm not in love with the line combination, but when you're facing a team with the goaltending as bad as the Devils, I think it piques my interest.
Yeah, one thing I will say about the Boston defense is the top line has been better defensively when Brad Marchand's not been there. And, you got to think maybe it's just the way the Marchand is playing, a little bit of age, that type of thing. So I'm not super confident that it's going to be their defensive numbers are going to be as poor as they've typically been with him there. And here's the thing that bothers me about the New Jersey top line is their ice time levels are really starting to dip. That's something we talked about with Tyler Toffoli last week, I believe. Jack Hughes, like 19 and a half minutes per game over the last couple of weeks. Bratt and Toffoli, somewhere around, 15 and a half to 17 and a half minutes. Like, that's really not a lot when you're paying $21,000 on DK, over $21,000 on DK for that line. Like, they're the second most expensive line on the slate, and you might not, their wingers might not play 17 minutes here tonight. Like, that's kind of the issue I'm running into with New Jersey. And if there weren't like a bunch of other expensive lines, like if Edmonton wasn't on the slate and Tampa Bay wasn't on the slate or whatever, I think I might be more inclined. But where you have similarly low ownership for Tampa Bay top line and similarly low ownership for Edmonton top line, if they're all in the same neighborhood, and I know Edmonton's guys are probably going to play 20 plus, and Kucherov and Point are probably going to play 20 and 22 minutes respectively or whatever. That's kind of my issue with the New Jersey top line. Like, I just think there are not that Edmonton's in a great matchup. Tampa Bay's is fine. I just think there are better matchups at a similar price, similar ownership, and where the ice time concerns aren't the same. Like, Jack Hughes only has 17 shots in his last 5 games, like 5 games, small sample, but this is a guy that's put up anywhere 4 to 5 shots a game over the first, 6-8 weeks of the season. So I think I'm out on New Jersey 1. New Jersey 2 is where it kind of gets more interesting for me because, like, this isn't a matchup where I'm like, the New Jersey top line's perfectly correlated on power play. Like, this isn't a good power play matchup for them. Like, Boston does take a lot of penalties, but they're a very good penalty killing team. So Hischier, Haula, and Palat is what's kind of interesting to me because Hischier and Palat, with anybody but Jesper Bratt, 3 expected goals per 60 minutes of 5-on-5 in their time together. Like, that's pretty good. And when you're going up against the second and third lines from Boston, depending on how they throw around their matchups, it's not something that I'm super worried about. So I think I kind of like New Jersey 2 better here and just going with them as a filler. Like, they're coming in with negative leverage on the top stacks, but it's not that bad. Like 1.1% top two stack percentage, 1.8% ownership. If you want to just 2-man it and leave Hall off or something like that, I think that's fine. But I think I'd rather go to the second, maybe even the third lines from New Jersey, just because I think there are other top lines that are, like I said, similarly priced, similar ownership, that just don't have the same ice time concerns. On the Boston side, I do like both top lines here. I would probably go with the line that's not going to go into Nico Hischier. That's probably going to be Coyle, DeBrusk, and Marchand. But I'm not. How should I say this? The big reason for stacking against New Jersey is their goaltending, right? Like, it's their goaltending that's basically let them down all season. It's the same thing with Carolina, even though Kochekhov's been a lot better, and we'll talk about that later. It's just that their penalty or their goaltending has been brutal, whether on the penalty kill or at 5-on-5. I think I prefer the Marchand, Coyle, DeBrusk line. I know you only get one guy on the top power play unit, but again, I don't think this is a particularly great power play matchup. Like, New Jersey's right around league average for time shorthanded. Boston's below average for power play opportunities per game. So I think I'm on both second lines in this game, but I certainly do understand going to both top lines. I even wrote up Morgan Geekie in the article up on Stokastic.com. Just head to the NHL section. It's free to read. I wrote him up just because they're all on the top power play unit. I like an $18,300 line at home against the New Jersey goaltending with positive leverage and perfectly correlated on the power play. Like, there are reasons to play that Boston top line. I just think I like the matchups a little bit better for the second line. So that's where I'm leaning. Boston 2, New Jersey 2. If I were to play one of the top lines, I think I'd play Boston 1.
Yeah, your point about the minutes is a good one. And, whether it's the coach wanting to roll 3 lines or trying to get something going. Another thing that I've noticed with the Devils recently, they've really started to miss Dougie Hamilton. He's their best puck mover by far. Luke Hughes had a very, very good game last night. Don't get me wrong, his first career 3-point game, but there's no one who can move the puck on that blue line like Dougie. So, yeah, kind of agree there. $20 super chat from Greg. He says, Happy New Year, sending good mojo. Thank you for tuning in. You've been in the chat basically since the start of the season. So, yeah, see your name in there. I appreciate you tuning in when we have shows. It's been a bit rocky the past week and a half, but, we're hoping to get a little bit more consistent going forward. Thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, hopefully 2024 will start off a lot better than 2023's finishing for us. But yes, thank you very much for the super chat. I like to think good karma comes around. So, we appreciate the $20 super chat. Hopefully you can make 100x that tonight in DFS. Let's see if we can help you out a little bit.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah.
Montreal Canadiens with a 2.6 total heading into Florida. The Panthers have a 3.8 total. Did Montreal play last night? No, right?
No.
Florida played last night. They beat the Rangers. John Quick was in net. That game was wild. Like, the Rangers didn't play awful. Bobrovsky just played great. Like, those games happen. You run into a hot goaltender. Even like, the score doesn't really say how that game went. Bobrovsky had a great game. So stick tap to the Bob. But here's one of the really, really chalky lines of the night, and there's the Florida second line, Tkachuk for Hagee Bennett. No shocker there. 17,200. Like, great matchup, great power play matchup. You want to play him, go for it. Now, I will say, as I just got to mention, I got a notification saying the Braves just traded for Chris Sale. It's kind of a weird trade, but anyway, I'm interested more in the Barkov, Reinhart, Evan Rodriguez line at 19,100. They're a little bit more expensive, but they're coming in at a third of the ownership. And if we're being honest with ourselves, they're one of the best lines in the NHL, just hands down. Like, they're disgusting how good they are. They had a good game yesterday. There's no matchup on Montreal that scares me. For ownership purposes, I think Florida 1 is my preferred play. If you want to go to Florida 2, that's fine. But like 19,100 really isn't that expensive for one of the best lines in the league. It's a great matchup. I think you can power play stack Florida 2, Florida, comma 2. But I'm in on Florida 1. On the Montreal side, I do have a little bit of interest in that Caulfield, Suzuki, Slafkovsky line. They're coming in with a little bit of negative leverage, which you don't really like to see. But they're only 15,100, so I don't mind them as a filler in your MME portfolio. If you want to keep riding that Josh Anderson wave, you can one-off them or two-man them with Monahan, but Florida 1 for me.
Yeah, I'm kind of struggling with this because I do think, like, matchup-wise, Florida 2 is in a better spot. Like, no, I agree with you, like, matching up against the Suzuki line or whatever, it's not that concerning. Like, they do have good defensive numbers, 2.1 expected goals against. That's for Montreal 1. But it's still not a matchup where I'm like, oh, I got to avoid this line, especially when you have a line as good as a Barkov line, like you were talking about. Like, I think Barkov's a Hart Trophy candidate, but that's another story for another day. So I do think that Florida 2 is in a much better matchup, and that's why I wrote up, well, that plus Carter Verhaeghe being on the top power play unit the last few games, like, it gives Verhaeghe a ton of value. What worries me about Florida 2 is twofold. One, Sam Bennett's off the power play now, so obviously that hurts his value. Two, like, I don't know if, like, Matthew Tkachuk has kind of stopped shooting the puck a little bit. And it's nothing, like, too extreme, but the last 4 weeks, and we're talking about a 12-game sample now, he's down to about 16 shot attempts per 60 minutes. He was over 20 to start the year. So not only is he not really scoring a lot because his shooting percentage has been down all season, he's shooting the puck less as well. And deferring to Bennett, deferring to Verhaeghe, that makes me kind of worried for full stacking that line. Because if one of the things that gives Tkachuk value is that he doesn't necessarily need like 2 goals and an assist, up until the season. He didn't necessarily need 2 goals and an assist to have, huge value in a tournament. Like, there are games he'd put up like 2 assists with like 8 shots or something like that, and that would get him the value. But if he's not scoring and he's not shooting like we normally would expect him to, that concerns me. Now, I assume that he turns that around, but like I said, we're looking at a 4-week sample here. So I think if I were to stack Florida, I agree with you on the power play stack. I think that's kind of the way that I would go. I'd go like Verhaeghe, Barkov, Reinhart, Verhaeghe, Barkov, Tkachuk, like something like that. Like, I would probably make sure I have Barkov and Verhaeghe, and then add one of Reinhart or Tkachuk depending on how the rest of your build goes. Because Montreal, like, one thing we mentioned in our Discord is that since Arbor Xhekaj got hurt and then went to the AHL about 6 weeks ago, they've been taking fewer penalties. Like, this was a team that was like second, third in the league in time shorthanded per game. They're all the way down to 8th now. So they're clearly taking fewer penalties. They're just not killing them. Like, they're just not a good penalty killing team. That's kind of the problem. Like, in their last 11 games, they've given up 9 power play goals against, because even though they're taking fewer penalties, they can't kill off the ones that they do take. So I agree with you on Florida. Some sort of power play stack. It's a way to get Florida 2 skaters in there and then dilute the ownership a little bit. So I think that's the direction I would go. On the Montreal side, I think is where things are a little bit more interesting, because like the Montreal top line, by their expected goals numbers, is their best line. They're not scoring, which is a little bit of an issue. They're shooting under 6% as a line, and they're going right into that Barkov matchup, which is absolutely brutal. And Montreal's power play has actually been pretty good with Uri Slafkovsky there. I was looking at their numbers, something like 9.5 goals per 60 minutes of 5-on-5. Like, that's actually a good power play. But Florida has a great penalty kill, and they're not nearly taking nearly as many penalties as they were last year. So I'm not super high on the Montreal top line here. I think I would dip down to Montreal 2. And I don't know if I would full stack, but certainly like Monahan, Anderson, Evans, like something like that. Anderson, I can't believe I'm saying this. Anderson would be the guy that I would focus around on my 2-mans on that second line. Like, he has 30 shots in his last 10 games with 6 goals in there. And, the second and third lines from Florida are, much weaker defensively. So if you want to go all the way down to Montreal 3, like, I have no problem there. Like, the top stacks tool has Montreal 2 and Montreal 3 basically even by top 2 percentage, and Montreal 3 coming in with less ownership, and they're cheaper. So if you want to do that, I think that's fine. But, I think the only thing I really have interest in from the Montreal side, like I said, is like maybe like a Monahan, Anderson, 2-man or something like that, and then just moving along.
Yeah, the point about Tkachuk is a good one. And also, like, not only is he shooting less, it's where he's shooting from, too. Like, normally you see him just, like, if this was basketball, he'd be in the paint. You know what I mean? Like, he's, like, always in the crease. He's been taking a lot more shots from the slot area, which is weird for him.
Here's something to back that up. At 5-on-5 in those 12 games that I just talked about, the only Florida forward with the worst individual expected goals mark. And individual expected goals is a pretty good proxy for proximity to the net. Like that's how that kind of works, because the closer you are, the more likely you are to score. The only Florida forward, the lower expected goals per 60 is Kevin Stenlund. Like Ryan Lombard, Nick Cousins, Luosterainen, all those guys are getting better quality shots off than Tkachuk is. That at 5-on-5, that's a concern.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, and I don't know why, but
you just know that we slandered him for the last 6 minutes. So yeah, tonight's hat trick night, 100%.
Yeah, Clayton, highlight that. Just remind us later because I won't remember. St. Louis Blues with a 2.7 total heading into Pittsburgh. The Penguins have a 3.7 total. Blues played last night. They played Colorado pretty well. They lost 2-1. It was Bennington in net, so it's going to be Joel, Hall of Famer, in net for the Blues. Here's another chalk of the night. Pittsburgh top line coming in at 24% projected ownership. It has positive leverage. They're only 19-2 because Rickard Rakell, very, very, very cheap. Now, was it the other night that Pittsburgh won 7-0 and Sidney Crosby had a straight up 0-0-0? Yeah. Like, that kind of happens. I mean, I played Nashville won last night. Forsberg had 2 goals and assist. Nyquist had 2 goals and assist, and Ryan O'Reilly had 3 shots on goal. It's like, it happens. This is a very good matchup. I'm actually a bit higher on Hofer than Bennington, but, Pittsburgh is fresh. Blues traveled from Colorado to Pittsburgh. Cliffy's our time zone tout. That's a couple of time zones to fly across, and it's always worth, like, okay, if you're on the East Coast, right? If you vacation on the West Coast, flying out west, not too bad. Flying back east, pretty miserable. So, like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to. I don't know how you equate that into a game. These are professionals. They're making way more money than I am sitting in this chair bashing them. Long story short, I really, really like Pittsburgh 1 here. Now, everyone's going to be like, oh, the Pittsburgh Penguins, power play, it's coming to life. This isn't a very good power play matchup anyway. Blues don't take a lot of penalties at all, which it's like one of the things they do well is not take penalties. So I think just full stacking Pittsburgh 1 makes some sense if you really like them, and I think they're in a very good spot. The ownership is high, but you can get different. Pittsburgh 2, I really like Pittsburgh 2 because you're going to see the Crosby line go out against Thomas, Kyrou, Buchnevich. You're going to see the Malkin line go out against Shen, Neighbors, and Kapanen, and that line is bad, man. They're 12,800 to full stack as well. The problem is they're coming in very negatively leveraged, but we were talking about it before the show. If Pacioretty does play tonight, I think that ownership gets diluted a little bit. And we'll talk about Pacioretty a little bit later. But Malkin, Smith, Drew O'Connor against Shen, Neighbors, Kapanen is heavily tilted to the Malkin side. So I do really like Pitt 1. I really, really like Pitt 2 here. And on the flip side, getting a little bit of positive leverage on the Blues top line, I think, is fine. The Crosby line, not a massive sample with Raquel, but when Raquel wasn't there, at best, they were trading chances. They're just playing high event hockey. So I don't mind getting to some St. Louis 1 in your MME portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a small sample with Raquel there. It's less than 60 minutes. The defense has been better with Raquel, and I will say, just in general this season, as much as Raquel struggled offensively before he got hurt, he was playing pretty well defensively. Like that was one of the reasons like Pittsburgh's second line was sometimes used in a shutdown matchup, is because him and Riley Smith were really helping out make that a good defensive line. So I think it's a worse matchup for Pittsburgh one than if Brian Rust was there or if Drew O'Connor was there or even if Riley Smith was there, frankly. So that's what kind of worries me for St. Louis here is like, I don't think it's as good of a matchup as it would be otherwise. Not that you're stacking St. Louis for the power play either. Their power play is generating a lot under their new coach, but the Pittsburgh penalty kill has generally been really good this year, and it has been amongst the best in the league in the month of December. So, a worse 5-on-5 spot, pretty bad power play spot for St. Louis. Like, if they were coming in at like 1-2% and there's huge positive leverage on them, like I would probably play them, but there's just not. 7% top two stacks, 6.6% ownership. Like, it's perfectly fine. I don't see enough of a reason to go in that direction ownership wise. Like I said, if they were a lot lower, that's probably the direction I'd be leaning towards. So I don't know. I don't really have a lot of interest in St. Louis here tonight. Like they're tied for what? The second lowest total in this game. I think the only team that's flat out lower than them is Montreal. So not really expecting a lot of goals here. Like I agree with you. If I were to play anything, it would be St. Louis 1. Pittsburgh 2, pretty good defensively with Drew O'Connor there. Pittsburgh 3 has been generally been good defensively so far this season. So it would be St. Louis 1, but it's a Pittsburgh side I do like again, but it's just going to be super chalky, right? You brought up all those ownership percentages. 24% on the top line, 12% on the second line. I wrote up the second line in the picks article for this reason. It is, I think there's still the most negatively leveraged line on the slate. But what I pointed out in the article is their top two stack probability of all the lines on DraftKings tonight that are 14,500. And we don't know what the Washington lines are going to be yet. We'll get to that in a second. So that could throw things, kind of out of whack. But of all the lines that we have projected, they're over 2 times higher than the next closest line amongst all the fillers for top two stack probability. Oh, hey man, it wouldn't be these last couple of weeks if something else like this didn't happen. So everybody say hi to Grimace Josh. So what I brought up is like they have negative leverage. A lot of filler lines generally do have negative leverage, but they are also much more likely to be a top two stack. I think you can like just two-man Smith and Malkin if you want. Like Drew O'Connor, he's typically a low shooting percentage guy. He'll score a goal every once in a while, but whether NHL or AHL, he has bad shot conversion rates. So, if you just want two-man Malkin and Smith, I think that's fine. But I do like Pitt 2. I like Pitt 1, but at 24%, like that's a lot. Like I get that it's a good matchup for them. They're not super expensive. Like they're not in that Edmonton, New Jersey tier. But like we just talked about Florida and Florida 1. Florida 1 is at home to Montreal, which I don't think is that much of a better matchup than St. Louis. And they're coming in with a third of the ownership projection. So like there are just other lines in that price range at much lower ownership that I think I would rather play. So no issue playing either of the top two Pittsburgh lines at all. I think the way I'm going to be building my single entry tonight, I would lean more towards Pitt 2. They're both in pretty good spots. Again, it's kind of like New Jersey. I just think that there are other, with New Jersey, they're similarly owned ownership-wise. This one, there are other spots coming in with much lower ownership at a similar price that I think I'd rather play. That's my only argument.
Yeah. Very chalky game. I don't know why this comparison is popping in my head, but like Drew O'Connor reminds me of like a Walmart Blake Coleman if you're looking for player comparisons. I don't know. It's just what's in my head. And it's coming out. All right. You can sign up using the link. I'll put it in the chat, but I think it's in the description below to get access to the best NHL data and tools in the industry. This is what you get. This is what I'm talking about. You get player and ownership projections. You get the top stacks tools, and you get the line combinations. And you get access to Discord. Cliffy and I are always in there, except for yesterday was a bit of a mess with both of us being sick. Jake is always around. We have a bunch of sharp members in there when we're not there to answer some questions and stuff. But yeah, Cliffy's going to run through the tools. I will drop the link in the chat. It's also in the description below. You can get weekly, you can get monthly, you can add Fantasy Cruncher. You don't have to add Fantasy Cruncher. Thank you, Fantasy Cruncher. But yeah, that's everything you get. And I think, the Discord is invaluable. I don't know how else to explain it other than you learn. Like, I even learn stuff. Like, there's people who you just have different eyeballs on different things, and it is just good for everybody. So I will drop that link in there right now. Bada bing, bada boom. Let's move on. That might be the most New Jersey thing I've done on the show. New York Rangers with a 2.9 total heading into Tampa Bay. The Lightning have a 3.1 total. Rangers played last night with Juanito Quick. It is going to be Igor Shesterkin in net for the Rangers tonight. Not a lot of ownership in this game. The highest owned line is coming in at 5.9% projected, and that is the Stamkos Hagel Sorelli line. Tampa top line, Kucherov, Point, Paul, coming in under 3% projected. And listen, I'm not a proponent. I'm not going to sit here, and maybe it's a bad bias because I'm a Rangers fan. I am a proponent of going, you know what? I'm not going to stack against Igor. Back-to-back on the road. And I don't know, like, Rangers struggle on the penalty kill. They don't take a ton of penalties. But, Kucherov, you give this team 3-4 power plays, they're going to burn you. If someone asked me, and someone probably would ask me if I didn't say this right now, would you rather play the Devils top line tonight or Tampa top line? It's the Tampa top line. They have similar top two stack percentages. Tampa Bay is a little bit cheaper. They have a higher total. They're at home. They're fresh. The Rangers are back-to-back. I like Tampa 1 here. I'm not saying run out and play them in single entry. I haven't built yet. I don't know what I'm going to do. But of the expensive lines over 20,000, I think Tampa Bay, I like Tampa 1 here. Now, what to do on the Rangers side? It's one of the rare times you see Rangers with under a 3 total. I think the second line's still good here, especially at the 3.9% projected ownership. I think that's fine. You want to go to Zibanejad, Kreider, Wheeler. Like, whatever you want to say about Wheeler, you can say about Wheeler, but he makes that line better. The numbers don't lie. So I don't mind getting to some Rangers here at low ownership. I'm kind of interested on your take on the Stamkos Hagel Sorelli line because the Rangers have been pretty bad defensively, 5-on-5. And they're probably going to avoid the Zibanejad line. The Trocheck, Lafreniere, Panarin line, very good offensively, but they trade chances. So I really don't mind Stamkos Hagel Sorelli either. So, I think I'm more in on the Tampa side here, which is rare. And I'm trying to break the homer narrative that I never stack against my Rangers. I like Tampa.
Yeah, I will talk about Tampa because I did mention Nikita Kucherov in the picks article today. What Kucherov is doing is absolutely absurd. Like, the point that I brought up is, like, his production has slowed down in December compared to November, and that production is still 9 goals, 19 points, and 51 shots in 12 games. Like, it's monster. What he's doing is just absolutely crazy. I also do like Tampa 1 here tonight for one, it is a back-to-back, as you said. The other, the Rangers penalty kill has been not good, let's say, over the last 4 or 5 weeks, bottom 10 in the league. So I do like Tampa 1. Like, they're all perfectly correlated. Like you said, this is one of the lines I think I prefer to play over New Jersey. Again, cheaper, lower ownership, or similar ownership. Sorry, at home, bigger total. Everything you said, completely right. I'm not in so much on Tampa 2. Like, you and I talk about how Sorelli and Stamkos just haven't been good, and they really, really haven't. It doesn't matter who's been on the other side of them, whether it's been Hagel, whether it's been Nick Paul, whether it's been, I think Jeannot spent a couple games there. Like, it just hasn't mattered. 90 minutes together for Tampa 2.3 expected goals for, 3.4 against, 2.1 actual goals for, 5.5 goals against per 60 minutes. Like, that's a number that's going to come down, but their defensive numbers just by expected and shots against metrics are terrible. I know why they're using them as a shutdown line. I don't know how much longer they can keep going with this. And that's what's kind of bringing the Rangers top line into play for me here. Like, you brought up Blake Wheeler, and like, he does make the line worse defensively, the Rangers top line. Like, there's no doubt about that. So that's why, like, I think Tampa 2 can be played for that reason. But I'm kind of going in the other direction with the Rangers top line. You know, with Blake Wheeler there, you're looking at like 15% more shots and expected goals. You know, actual goals have more than doubled since Blake Wheeler got to the top line. You still get 2 out of 3 guys on the top power play unit. Last 12 games for Tampa Bay, bottom 10 penalty kill in the league. And it doesn't matter, like, back-to-back or not, the Rangers power play can shred any team. And if Tampa is not on their game on the PK, that top line can get there basically through the power play alone, because they're not super expensive. 15,800 on DraftKings, positive leverage. Like, you can't, like, if you're playing like, you know, New Jersey or Edmonton or something like that, you won't be able to fit in Rangers. But if you're playing another mid-price line, I think there's merit to playing Rangers 1 here, because I am not worried about that Cirelli-Stamkos matchup whatsoever. Again, the Tampa Bay penalty kill not being good. I think that Rangers top, like, if you want to go to Rangers 2, like, they are the better line, no question about that. And it's not really a tough matchup against the Tampa top line either. I just think if you're looking for like a mid-priced line, you know, under that 17K or 16K mark or whatever, I think the Rangers top line is certainly up there, because it's a good matchup at 5-on-5. It's a good matchup on the penalty kill. It's like, yes, the Rangers are on a back-to-back, but like, it's not like St. Louis. It's not like they travel time zones. Like, they're in the same state. You know what I mean? So I kind of like Rangers 1 here, but Tampa 1 is by far my favorite line in this game. Yeah.
I mean, you said Barkov is a hard candidate. Kucherov is definitely a hard candidate. So, like, yeah. Wheeler's hand's still there. Skating, not so much. That's why he's a bit wonky defensively. So, yeah. Carolina Hurricanes with a 3.3 total heading into Toronto. The Fighting Marty Joneses have a 3.2 total. Samsonite went last night, so it's probably going to be Marty Jones. Like, I wasn't prepared. I'm not prepared for more. You know, I promised a mariachi band, but when I'm feeling better, we will do it. Yeah, 2 things are true about the Leafs. They score some goals. They give up more. They're just not good defensively. And the way to win for Toronto is to outscore teams. They couldn't even do that against the Blue Jackets last night. I like Carolina 1 here. Aho, Svechnikov, Teravainen. 17,200 coming in with positive leverage, 3.3% projected ownership. Like, okay, like, there's obviously concerns about Carolina, their power play allocation, their defenseman taking shots, yada, yada, yada. I just, with Jarvis being on the stall line and Bunting being on the Kotkaniemi line, like, I feel confident in saying that Aho, Svechnikov, Teravainen are going to play the most. And Svechnikov is starting to turn it around here. He had a brutal start to his season coming off the ACL surgery. Couldn't hit the net. That was his big problem. Once he started hitting the net, the goals started coming. I like Carolina 1 here. Now, Toronto's back-to-back here. They're at home, though. They didn't have to travel. Or were they in Columbus last night? It's either way, it's a short trip. Carolina goaltending, not great. Like, Kochekov's been better than anything else they've started, but like, Matthews has been on a heater. Nylander has looked good. That second line has looked good, and they're getting no ownership. Both these lines have very good positive leverage. I don't mind would I play them in 1 to 3? I would definitely consider it. I probably wouldn't end up there in my personal build, but I think there's merit there. The more lineups you make, the easier it is to get to Toronto here.
Yeah, I wrote up Toronto 1 in my picks article today. Again, free to read over at stochastic.com most days, as long as I have power or I'm not shivering in bed. What I mentioned about Toronto is like they had Matthews Marner together to start the year. Tyler Bertuzzi was there for most of it, Matthew Knies for some of it, and they just weren't good. And like there was a reason why William Nylander was moved up to the top line for like a month or whatever it was. But they've looked a lot better since being reunited. Their last 60 minutes together, 4 expected goals per 60 minutes generated, 4.1 actual goals scored per 60 at 5-on-5. Those are numbers that you would expect from a Matthews Marner line. That's what we've seen in years gone by. Again, still a small sample. It's only a handful of games, but they do look like they're turning things around a bit. And what I mentioned in the article is like Aho and Svechnikov, very, very good offensively at 5-on-5. That's why I have Sebastian Aho in the article. Well, that and Toronto's top line, not that great defensively. But they also give it up defensively as well. Carolina does. That top line, 60 shot attempts against per 60 minutes. That's below league average. 2.6 expected goals against per 60 minutes. Also below league average. The Carolina penalty kill is like really great. And Kochetkov has been better. I think I saw, 14 goals in his last 7 starts. Like that's kind of what you would expect from Carolina goaltending. But this Matthews line is good enough to score on anybody in any kind of matchup. And they're not coming in with any ownership. That's one of the big reasons why I wrote them up in the article. And I do mean very little ownership. 1.5% on Toronto 1, 3.7% on Toronto 2. I think either of the top lines are fine to play. There is a bit of a price difference, 1,800, so it might depend on your build. I always play the line with the best player, and right now that's Austin Matthews. Start of the season it was probably William Nylander. Right now it's certainly Austin Matthews. So I like Matthews, Marner, and Knies here, or Knies. I keep saying Knies. I got too used to that. Matthews, Marner, and Knies here going out against the Aho line. But I also like the Aho line in return for kind of the same reason. Like the Matthews line, for as better as they've been defensively or offensively, they still are not good defensively. So I do like Carolina 1 here. Carolina 2, like we should probably mention, like Carolina 2 isn't really the second line anymore. That Nature's Kotkaniemi bunting line. I was looking, I think it's over like the last 8 games. Kotkaniemi's last amongst their forwards in ice time per game. Like you can't be last amongst forwards and be called the second line. Like I'm sorry, that's just not the way it works. So Jarvis, Stahl, and Martinook is probably the second line now. I actually don't mind them if they're going to get some bottom 6 matchups against Toronto. Like I'm not super worried about Toronto's bottom 6 defensively. Jarvis is still on the top power play unit. Stahl and Martinook, Stahl can play like 16 minutes a game. Martinook like 14, 15 minutes a game. So if you just want 2 men like Stahl and Jarvis, or Jarvis and Martinook or something like that, I think that's perfectly fine. But it's both top lines I like in this game.
Yeah. Jarvis on that third line, Stahl line is interesting because Martinook was their best player in the playoffs last year somehow. And I don't know. I just kind of like that combination. So, yeah, and the Leafs bottom 6 is putrid. So, don't mind that. Nashville Predators with a 3 total heading into Washington. The Capitals also have a 3 total. Both these teams played last night. Washington was in Long Island. They got killed 5-1. Nashville lost in overtime to the Wings. Washington is interesting here because Pacioretty could be back tonight. He was practicing. I don't think they didn't want him to play on the back, like the front, both ends of the back-to-back. Now, the way the Washington started their lines and finished their lines yesterday, I don't know how much it matters because in practice, if Pacioretty does play, they're practicing Wilson, Strome, Ovechkin, McMichael, Mantha, Protas, and then Evgeny Kuznetsov, Phillips, Pacioretty. So if Pacioretty's in, I would make the assumption that those are the lines. If he's not in, the way they started them yesterday was Ovechkin, Wilson, McMichael, Strome, Mantha, Protas. And then by the end of the game, Nicholas Aube-Kubel was playing with Ovechkin. So if Pacioretty's out, no idea what the lines are going to be. Pacioretty's in, the practice lines are a fair assumption. Saros went last night. Kevin Lankinen is sick. He might go. If he doesn't go, it's going to be Yaroslav Askarov for the Predators. He's not just some guy. He's probably the top goalie prospect in the NHL, along with Dustin Wolf. So, I mean, his AHL numbers won't blow you away, but he's a highly regarded prospect. In this game, it's hard to say with the top stacks for Washington because the lines are what they started with yesterday. I don't like if they go back to Strome, Wilson, Ovechkin. I don't mind that line as long as the ownership is in check. It's a good power play spot. I'd rather just play the Nashville line, Forsberg, O'Reilly, Nyquist. Now, I know they haven't been great recently. They were good yesterday, but before that, their expected goals numbers weren't great. But, nothing the Wings can't cure, and maybe they keep that going tonight. So I'm in on Forsberg, O'Reilly, Nyquist, and I need to see if Pacioretty's in or not, because if he's in and he's with Kuznetsov and Phillips, that line is super cheap. McMichael will be back with Mantha. That line is super cheap. You know what I mean? So that could depress some other mid-range lines ownership. So it's kind of a big question mark right now.
Yeah, it's just hard to say what you want to play on Washington because, like, the third period last night, Ovechkin got moved to a line with Evgeny Kuznetsov and Nicholas Aube-Kubel. You know what I mean? Like, they just completely blew everything up. I think the only pair of forwards that stayed together in their top nine was Mantha and Protas. As Strome was moved, I guess, to the top line last night. I don't even know how you would have, assigned numbers to those lines in that third period. It basically comes down to this. Two things for me. One, basically whatever line Dylan Strome is on is the line that I have interest in. Like, I'm at the point now where I don't want to say for sure he's their best offensive player, but it's tough to say that he's not. Like, he can score goals. He's a really good playmaker. He's good in transition. Like, he's been a very good player for Washington since he got there. It's just he's having to do the heavy lifting for guys like Ovechkin or Kuznetsov on the power play, TJ Oshie when they're on the second and third lines together. Like, he's the guy that has to carry lines. That's why, I didn't mind seeing him with Protas and Mantha, because at least Mantha is a guy that can kind of help him drive the play a little bit. But if Pacioretty's in the lineup, that could change everything. And we just won't know until warm-up start. Now, thankfully, there's one late game tonight that starts at 10 Eastern, and the other 6 games all start at 7 Eastern at the same time. So we'll know before lock. There won't be any other games that will have started by then. So if you're around, you will have time to make some swaps. But, if it's like Pacioretty, Strome, and Mantha, that's a line I would have a lot of interest in as a filler line to go with Tampa Bay or Edmonton or Toronto or whatever. So it's just tough to say exactly what to play because they did blow everything up, and they might be introducing Pacioretty, who, by the way, is 2,500 on DK. He's stone min price. That's another problem. If he's on a line with Mantha, they could technically be on the second line, top power play, and you could stack them for less than $6,000 between them. That's kind of the issue. In a nutshell, I will say whatever line Dylan Strome is on is the line that I have interest in. I just don't know what we can say until warm-up start because there's no other center that's been able to do what Strome has done. Nicholas Backstrom has done. Evgeny Kuznetsov, he's been on the fourth line for very good reason, I think. Nick Dowd is a defensive guy. They have literally no other player that can do what Dylan Strome does. So you have to pay attention to warm-ups, see where he's slotted, see if Pacioretty's in, and then just kind of go from there. If Strome's on the top line with Ovechkin and Wilson, I think they're playable. But at that point, I'd probably just say, I'm not playing Washington. You know what I mean? Let's put it this way as well. Washington has the lowest home total here tonight. Of the 7 home teams tonight, Washington has the lowest total. I'm not holding my breath to run out and play a bunch of caps here. I'll just have to see what warm-ups look like. On the Nashville side, it's the top line. Like, they keep screwing around with their depth. None of their depth is really doing a whole lot. Like, even, Trainin and Sissons as a two-man so far this year, 1.5 expected goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. Parsonen and Trainin as a two-man, basically the same. Like, this is not a good line. Novak and Cody Glass are probably the fourth line now. So, like, do you want to play them for like 10 or 11 minutes of ice time? Like, if you want to, Darcy Kemper has to start again unless they go to an AHL goalie. So, like, I get it, but I think I'd rather just go back to Nashville 1. Like, they've started to pick up their offense again after a little bit of a lull, 3.1 expected goals per 60 minutes of 5-on-5 over the last 3 weeks. What I will say is that, to a lesser degree, because they're a lot cheaper, there are ice time issues like there are for New Jersey. Like, Philip Forsberg's down to 17.27 a game over his last 10 games. That's almost 2 minutes less than the first 2 months of the season. So there are some ice time issues. It is a back-to-back. Washington typically does have a pretty good penalty kill. That's one thing that's kind of saved them, is that they've been one of the 5 best penalty kills in the NHL basically all season. So I think it's Nashville 1 or nothing for me from Nashville, and then wait to see if Pacioretty is in the lineup and who Dylan Strome is playing with. Got to say, of all the games here tonight, probably the one that I had the least interest in for stacking.
Yeah. I wonder if our resident Caps fan, KJ, is in the chat, because if you live on Narrative Street, the Caps are the team who drafted Phil Forsberg and traded him for Martin Arat. One of the more lopsided trades in NHL history. So if you live on Narrative Street, that's, I'm sure Phil Forsberg always has this game circled. Edmonton Oilers with a 3.2 total heading into Los Angeles. The Kings have a 3.4 total. This is an interesting game. One, both of these teams are rested. This is the only game we can say on this slate where both the teams are rested. Two, the Kings are a wagon. Like, they're an absolute wagon. But they don't have goalies. Like, Talbot, he had a good stretch earlier. And Dave Rittich has a .951 save percentage. You know who he started against? The Sharks. Twice. McDavid, Hyman, Nugent, Hopkins are creating like 466 expected goals per 60 on the top line. They're coming in at 4.2% projected ownership. Highest positive leverage on the slate. They're going to see a fair bit of that Kopitar, Kempe, Byfield line, which is an absolute wagon. We recommended on this show last year Connor McDavid going into Boston. He's matchup proof. That is a Bergeron line. That is breaking the number one cardinal rule of DFS. If we were willing to do that, how do you not even consider this line here at 4%? With goalie as a question mark, I do really like Connor McDavid, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins now. Am I going to run out and play them in 1 to 3? I will definitely consider it at that ownership. If they were chalk tonight, I would say, you know what, Talbot, eat your Wheaties, take your vitamin C, please save 41 of 44. But like 22,500 when we've seen Colorado 1 get close to 26,000 feels cheap. You know what I mean? So like I do really like Edmonton 1 here. On the LA side, they are pretty cheap. I know Stewie Skinner coming off a shutout, but like I do like the Edmonton coach putting Ryan McLeod with Warren Fogle and Draisaitl. That's at least a competent defensive line. Like, they kind of are trying to play a little bit of defense here. So I think it would be LA 1 for me at 1.3% projected. LA 3, super cheap, but they're coming in very negatively leveraged. Dubois, Kaliev, Laferriere. So I think it would be LA 1 for me. And it'd just be both top lines in this game.
Yeah, I was looking to see what the slowdown's been for the Edmonton top line, and it's looking like their first half under the new coach in the second half. In the second half, they're at still 4.6 expected goals, 4.9 actual goals at 5-on-5. Like these guys are just absolutely insane. Like we say this is a bad matchup for Edmonton, and it is. But this is what I'll say is these two teams played in the first round of the playoffs last year. And this is basically the same Los Angeles lineup that played last year. Add Pierre-Luc Dubois, take out Gabriel Velarde and Alex Iafallo or whatever. It's basically the same forward and defense group. And Edmonton scored 12 goals in 3 games in Los Angeles. And Los Angeles was one of the best teams in the league after the trade deadline, after they got Gavrikov, after they got Korpisalo and all that. They were one of the best teams, at least a 5-on-5 in the league. And Edmonton went into Los Angeles, hung 2 5 spots on them in the playoffs. So like, yeah, it's not a bad matchup. This Edmonton line is matchup proof. They can blow up absolutely anybody. And that's why I hate saying Edmonton 1 is my favorite line on the slate. It's like, oh wow, the Connor McDavid line that is also the most expensive line is your favorite line. Like, great analysis, Cliffy. But like, there's not a lot, like you said, there's no, like very low ownership coming in on them. I'm wondering, like, it's a Saturday. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. It's the only late game. The other 6 games start at 7 Eastern. Like maybe people are worried about late swapping or missing news and like just don't want to play. Like maybe there are some people that just don't want to play them late. Like there's not much ownership, 4.2% on that top line. Again, I would rather play Edmonton going into Los Angeles than New Jersey going into Boston. I'll say that much. And like, if you want to leave off one of the wingers, just make it an expensive 2-man and then use a mid-priced line, somewhere else as a secondary stack, I think you can do that. But yeah, it's not a good matchup for Edmonton. I think they've shown that they can blow up just about any line, any goalie in any matchup at any time. So I'm with you. I do like Edmonton 1. I think on the Kings side, though, I would probably go to Kings 2. Like the Edmonton second line is better defensive, like much, much better defensively without Evander Kane there, but they're still only about league average by expected goals against. And this Kings second line has been, like, you want to talk about wagons. I was looking over the last 3 weeks. 4 expected goals and 87 shot attempts per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 for this Kings second line. They're scoring 3.2 goals per 60 minutes, which off the top of my head is about 25% better than league average, and they're shooting under 7%. Like if they ever shoot like 10%, they're going to be one of the best 5-on-5 scoring lines in the league. They're getting more ice time too. That's the other thing here is like they're not getting like the 15, 16 minutes that they had been at times this season. They're up somewhere between the 17 and 19 minute mark, like all 3 guys. Trevor Moore, 18 shots in his last 5 games. He's been scoring goals. Kevin Fiala is still on the top power play unit. Not worried about the Edmonton goaltending, that's for sure. So I think I prefer Kings 2 on that side. But yeah, I'm with you. I just because there's such low ownership on Edmonton's top line, I do like them here tonight.
Yeah, I mean, if Pittsburgh won and Edmonton won ownership or flip-flop, then it's a different story. But 4% projected for Connor McDavid line, like they could be going up against a brick wall.
And on a 7-gamer too. Like this isn't a 12 or a 13 game slate. Like it's only 7 games.
Yeah. So, wow. That is the 7-game slate. My voice is starting to go, but that's okay. Let's get to some defensemen here before we do that. Coming up after us, 6 p.m. NBA Live Before Lock with Emac and Neil. If you are playing NBA, 6 p.m. Live Before Lock. Let's talk a little bit about defensemen here. Top of the board, Roman Josi, almost under 7,000 tonight, $7K flat. Pretty good price for him. Stellaris in net for Florida. Matheson at 6,200. Like, it's so weird because, like, I just remember a few years ago, it's like, yeah, I really like Matheson, 3,400 for the Penguins. Now he's running the Montreal power play that's looked better. I don't mind Matheson here. Bouchard, probably going to be pretty low owned. Who else do you like him?
Yeah, Matheson was the guy at the top. I do want to mention Morgan Riley. Like, one of the things that typically hurt Riley in previous seasons was like he wasn't a big shot blocker, but he's over 2 blocks per game this season. And on DraftKings in particular, that's something that means a lot. Like going from like 1.25 to like 2.1 blocks per game is a huge jump. And, might be a matchup where he has to block a bunch, and like Carolina's goaltending, again, not great. So Riley's not at the top for me. I have Matheson and then McAvoy, but don't mind Riley if you're playing a ton of lineups. In the mid price range, I think there are 3 guys that stand out above the rest: Brandon Montour, Brent Burns, Victor Hedman. I also suspect that at the very least, Montour is probably going to be chalky. I think Burns will be as well. Maybe even Hedman. Also, I do want to mention Colton Parayko. He's starting to climb up a bit in price, but Justin Falk's out for St. Louis, and this is a team that typically leans on their top 4 defensemen somewhat similarly like the New York Islanders do. And when one guy goes out, it's not like, they suddenly give the third pair an extra 6 minutes a game. I think the top guys are just going to play a lot more. So I don't mind Parayko in that mid-price range for St. Louis. For cheaper guys, Ekblad certainly, but he'll also be chalky. Mason Lohrei for Boston. Luke Hughes, still running the top power play unit. He's not great for peripherals, but Boston does take a ton of penalties. And if that penalty kill ever has like one bad night off, Hughes at his price, I think if you're playing a bunch of lineups, is worth the pain. But it's the sub 3K guys that I think I like more for the cheap defensemen. I wrote up Jordan Spence. Even with Gavrikov back, he's still getting like 16, 17 minutes a game. That's not huge, but he's also only 2,700. Jordan Harris back from Montreal. He's only 2,700. And with Mikhail Sergachev out, it's actually been Hayden Fleury getting more ice time than Darren Radish. So don't mind Hayden Fleury for Tampa Bay if, as one of those sub 3K guys, if you need a punt.
Yeah, I echo that. Let's talk about some goalies here. Top of the board, Florida hasn't confirmed a goalie, but Bob went last night, so it's probably going to be Stellaris. He's 8,400. It's like, okay, like the one thing we can talk crap about DraftKings pretty much every day, but the one thing about their NHL product that has always been steady is they go off Vegas odds for goalie pricing. So, if a team's a massive favorite, their goalies are going to be the most expensive. Tristan Jarry, 8,300. Boston goalie, whoever starts, is 8,200. We'll have to see.
I'll just to jump in, it's probably going to be Allmark. Swayman hasn't started 2 games in a row in like 7 or 8 weeks. They've been pretty consistent on going back and forth. And Swayman started the last one, so I think it'll be Allmark tonight.
Yeah, I mean, they're very similar. So I think Allmark's a bit better, but whatever. I don't know. Vasilevsky at 8K. Again, I don't really want to be spending up for goalie tonight. So you start going down the list. Kochetkov, 7,500. Igor, 7,400. Whoever starts for Nashville is 7,300. Don't really want to play Vitek Vanacek tonight, but he's 7,200. Joel Hofer is interesting at 7,100. And I think, as much as I really don't want to do it, I do kind of like Jake Allen here tonight. And again, I'll just reiterate, just because we love Florida, that's the reason why we like Jake Allen. Not, you love Florida and why you touting the goalie against him. The exact same reason why we like Florida. You know what I mean? So yeah, Jake Allen, 7K. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. Like the 2 goalies I was considering writing up were basically at opposite ends of the spectrum. Is either going to be Linus Ullmark for Boston. He might see some decent shot volume. He's the highest projected goalie that we have here tonight. Also the highest ownership projection as well. Ownership, I don't really care about ownership for goaltending, though. That's not really a big deal for me. But it is Jake Allen that I wrote up. What I mentioned in the article is Florida generates a ton of shots, not necessarily a ton of goals. Like bottom 10 for goals per 60 over the last month. I think 22nd in the league by goals per 60 this season, even though they're a top 3 shots on goal team. Montreal's been taking fewer penalties. Hopefully not, Allen won't have to see as much on the PK. Like he can get blown up. He could allow, 4 goals on 9 shots and be gone by the middle of the first period. That's the danger of playing these cheap goalies that face a lot of volume. But I do think he has big upside as well for that reason. Did put in Askarov. Like shot volume is an issue if Askarov starts for Nashville, but he's also only 7,300. So if you want like a quote better team, to use for a cheap goalie. I think Askarov is in play. Hate to say it, but Stewie Skinner in that mid-price range, like as long as he doesn't get blown up, he's been looking rough. He's not even in my top 5 goalies. For me, it'd be Allen, then Allmark, then Askarov for tournaments. But if you just have like that mid-price range left in your salary, I think Skinner's fine for a late goalie here tonight.
Yeah, I mean, listen, goalies are weird creatures. If you have one you like, you play them. You know what I mean? Yeah. Goalie ownership doesn't matter. Goalie points do. Who are you liking for your hat trick pick?
We just talked about him at the end of the show, and he's one of my favorite players in the league. The Kings are a wagon. I'm going Kevin Fiala.
Nice. I was going to go Svechnikov, but he had a hat trick the last game. I need to break my streak. I don't think he's going to go back-to-back hat tricks. I was saying I don't want to go Homer. I'm going Mika Zibanejad. Power play city.
Whatever. Sometimes, hey, it's our last show, 2023. Just go full Homer.
Yeah. So we will be back Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, probably next week. We're going to go have some vitamin C, maybe some hot tea, maybe some Jewish penicillin as chicken soup. And I can say that I'm Jewish.
Yeah, Josh is Jewish, just so everybody knows that.
Let's relax, okay? Let's relax. Hope the new year brings you some positivity. I don't know. Like, I'm not good wishing people just be happy. You know what I mean? Like, have a good new year. We'll see you next year. Feel better, Cliffy, and we'll see you y'all on Tuesday.
Yeah, just thanks a lot for the support over these last few weeks and all season. You guys have really been showing up for the likes and the views and registering and stuff. We certainly appreciate that. We know the last few weeks, been getting sick, losing power. Like, it's been a lot that's gone wrong. Brand new year starts in a couple days. Brand new slate of shows start on Tuesday. New year, new us, maybe. We'll see. We'll try to get Josh not painted purple. But thanks again for all the support. Certainly have a happy and safe New Year's Eve. And let's win some money tonight. And we'll see you on Tuesday.
High five.